Do you know how many super warships were built by the Japanese in order to dominate the Pacific during World War II? Many people have only heard of the Yamato, but they don't know that there were many other powerful warships behind it. Some were the masters of the treaty era, and some were converted into hybrids. At that time, the warships of the Japanese Navy were quite powerful. In this issue, I will take you through the super warships Japan had in World War II. By the way, let's see who was more powerful than the American warships at that time. The fifth, Fusang-class battleship. Among the most flawed warships of the Japanese Navy, the Fusang-class battleship is definitely near the top. As the first class of self-designed super dreadnought battleships in Japan, the Fusang-class had two ships, Fusang and Yamashiro. It can be said that the Fusang-class had a fatal flaw from its birth, but it served throughout World War II, ultimately meeting a fragmented and silent end. Let's look at the parameters first. The Fusang-class battleship had a standard displacement of 34,000 tons and a full load of 38,000 tons. The length of the ship was 212 meters, and the width was 28.6 meters. The most controversial aspect was its main gun layout. 6 twin turrets with 356mm main guns all lined up along the center line. 3 were piled on the front deck and 3 were on the rear deck. While it looked energetic, it was actually top-heavy and unstable. The center of gravity was seriously high, and it would shake a lot when it encountered large waves. When the main guns were fired, the muzzle blast would damage the superstructure, and even the windows of the bridge were often smashed. Its cruising speed was only 22.5 knots, slower than Japanese destroyers, so it couldn't run fast when it needed to. The armor also couldn't keep up. The main belt armor thickness was 305mm, but the deck armor was only 64mm. It couldn't stand up to not only the main guns of an enemy battleship, but also the 500-kilogram bombs used by US Army bombers. The actual performance of the Fusang-class battleship was terrible. In 1944, the Fusang and the Yamashiro were part of the Nishimura fleet, ordered to attack the US forces in the Surigao Strait. As a result, they became live targets as soon as they entered the strait. The US military used radar to guide their main guns, first firing star shells to illuminate the targets, then using 406mm main guns to bombard them. The Fusang was hit by multiple torpedoes, and the ship broke in the middle. The front and rear sections drifted for a while and then sank. Of more than 1,400 members of the crew, almost none survived. The Yamashiro didn't fare any better. It was hit by several torpedoes and shells, finally exploding and sinking. It became the last battleship in history to be sunk by another battleship's gunfire. Although the Fusang-class had a lot of shortcomings, it was a stepping stone for Japanese warship design. Its design mistakes allowed the Japanese Navy to realize the importance of main gun layout and center of gravity. Later, the Nagato-class and Yamato-class avoided these pits. But as a test product, the fate of the Fusang-class was long destined. It was like a semi-finished product on the battlefields of the Pacific. It never had the chance for a decent counterattack before becoming scrap iron in the deep sea. The fifth is the Ise-class battleship. The Ise-class battleship can be described as another peculiar Japanese warship. A good battleship had to have its main guns disassembled to install a flight deck, and in the end it became a hybrid that was neither a good battleship nor a good aircraft carrier. Its transformation was in fact a desperate measure as the Japanese military retreated across the Pacific. The Japanese Navy built only 2 ships in this class, the Ise and the Huyu. In fact, the Ise-class was originally an improvement version of the Fusang-class. The standard displacement was 36,000 tons and a full load of 40,000 tons. The ship was 215 meters long and 31.7 meters wide. It was more stable and faster than the Fusang-class, with a speed reaching 25 knots. Its early equipment was 8 356mm main guns, and the front and rear layout of the main guns was also stronger than the Fusang-class. The main armor was 305mm and the deck armor was 85mm. It could fire a 356mm shell 30 kilometers away. If it had been developed as a normal battleship, it should have been a main force on the Pacific battlefield. But in 1942, the Japanese lost 4 aircraft carriers during the Battle of Midway. The Japanese High Command panicked and ordered the Ise-class to be converted into hybrid carriers. The 2 main guns at the rear were removed, and 70 meters long flight deck was added, along with 2 catapults. Theoretically, it could carry 22 Suyusei dive bombers and Suyin reconnaissance seaplanes. But after the transformation, they found out the problem. The flight deck was too short, so the planes could only be launched for takeoff. They could not land. In other words, after the planes flew out to perform a mission, they either had to find other aircraft carriers to land on or crash into the sea. The survival rate for the pilots was extremely low, and after removing the rear main guns, its firepower was greatly reduced. With only 4 twin turrets of 356mm guns remaining, it was hard to deal with US Navy warships. The flight deck also took up too much space, so anti-aircraft guns couldn't be installed, leaving it with almost no resistance to US air attacks. In addition, the advantages of the Ise-class transformation never materialized in actual battle. In the 1944 Battle of the Philippine Sea, the Ise and other Japanese carriers were ordered to carry reconnaissance aircraft. But just after a few were launched, they encountered US carrier aircraft and could only hide in a squall, failing to even receive intelligence from their own planes. Later, they were sent to transport supplies and ammunition from Japan to the Philippines. On the way, they were attacked by a US submarine, and a Japanese carrier was hit by a torpedo and almost sank. Before the surrender of Japan in 1945, the Ise and Huyu hid in Core Harbor. They were bombed by US carrier aircraft, and their decks were blown into 1,000 holes. In the end, they were both sunk in the harbor, becoming a living textbook for the failure of the Japanese military's modifications. It can be said that the Ise-class was a product of the Japanese military's strategic chaos. They wanted a battleship and the function of an aircraft carrier, but as a result, neither side was pleased. It's like being forced to learn 2 skills and ending up mastering neither one. They could only wait in the harbor to be bombed, lacking even the courage to go out to sea. The third is the Kongō-class battlecruiser. The Kongō-class battlecruiser at the time can be said to be their primary workhorse. It was originally a British-designed battlecruiser that the Japanese military later bought and modified into a high-speed battleship. Using its 30-knot speed, it became the most active main warship on the Pacific battlefield and was the only Japanese battleship class that could keep up with aircraft carriers. Overall, the foundation of the Kongō-class was very good. The standard displacement was 32,000 tons with a full load of 36,000 tons. The ship was 212 meters long and 31 meters wide. The British designers gave it 8 356mm main guns in a 2 front and 2 rear layout. The rate of fire was nearly twice as fast as the main guns on other Japanese battleships. Although the armor was not as good as a true battleship, it was adequate. The main armor thickness was 203mm, and the deck armor was only 64mm. It couldn't stand up to not only the main guns of an enemy battleship, but also the 50-kilogram bombs used by US Army bombers. The actual performance of the Kongō-class battleship was a famous night battle killer. In 1942, the naval battle of Guadalcanal, the Hiei and the Kirishima took advantage of the night to attack US transport ships. With their 356mm main guns, they wrecked the US Navy's cruiser line and heavily damaged the US San Francisco. In the 1944 Taiwan Strait War, the Kongō-class was even more fierce. It followed carriers to intercept a US fleet, and with its 356mm guns, sank the US destroyer escort USS Samuel B. Roberts. It became one of the few battleships in World War II to sink an enemy warship. But the shortcomings of the Kongō-class were also obvious. It was weak defensively. After all, it was born as a battle cruiser, and its armor was much thinner than a pure battleship. Once hit by a large caliber cannon, it was easy to have problems. In 1942, the naval battle of Guadalcanal, the Kirishima encountered the USS Washington and was hit by long-range 406mm cannon fire. The ship was seriously damaged and sank in the end. The Hiei of the same class was crippled by US carrier aircraft in the same battle and was later scuttled to prevent capture. The Haruna was bombed by US aircraft in 1945 while in Core Harbor. The Kongō was hit by 2 torpedoes from the US submarine, the USS Sea Lion, in 1944, which blew through its ammunition dumper. It eventually exploded, becoming the only Japanese battleship to be sunk by a submarine in World War II. With that, all 4 warships of the Kongō-class were sunk. It can be said that the Kongō-class witnessed the peak of the Japanese naval forces, following the carrier squadrons to sweep Southeast Asia, and also witnessed the decline of the Japanese army, as one ship after another sank under the 3-dimensional attacks of the US military. Even today, many remember its name, not because it was the strongest, but because it was the most active loser on the Pacific battlefield.